Welcome to episode 11 of WrestleRotica. This week, as with every other week, we feature two news stories. The first story this week is entitled Devil's Food, and it stars Kane and Daniel Bryan, affectionately known as Team Hell No. The second story is entitled The Straight Edge Society, and this stars CM Punk, Natalya, and Luke Gallows. And without further ado, let's get to this week's stories. This story is called Devil's Food, and it is written by user Funky and Fishnet. Kane hadn't been able to resist watching on a backstage monitor. Daniel was really going to get a corporate makeover. He'd spent months cultivating his beard. It was his trademark, his identity. It was on t-shirts. Kane shouldn't watch. He had things to do, plans to make, but his heart still shuddered at the sound of Daniel's entrance music. And there he was, suited up like a monkey, and his usually unkempt hair greased neatly back. The beard was still present. Kane found himself very relieved. He stayed relieved right up until Wade Barrett appeared with an electric razor. Then, a very familiar fire began burning inside of him, in sync with his hands curling into fists. Strangely, there was a faint, then progressively louder chant beginning to rail through his head too. It sounded like, "No! No! No!" Kane growled under his breath, but the chant kept going, and the fire was still burning. And why was Daniel sitting in the barber's chair like a lamb to the slaughter? There was a pan-creaking noise, and Kane realized, absently, that he'd managed to bend a folding chair in half with his bare hands. He didn't even remember picking it up. It was irrelevant anyway. Because Daniel wasn't being a compliant suit and tie guy, he was beating down Wade Barrett and shaving Barrett's beard off instead. Daniel's facial hair stayed fulsome and whole. Kane smiled. It was the sort of smile that made most of the roster run for cover. Daniel had never run from Kane's expressions. Once upon a time, Kane had been a monster. It was all he'd ever known, and he'd embraced it. It was who he was, to his very core. His father. Kane swallowed at the thought of his late father. His father had seen what Kane could be, the destruction and pain he could cause. He'd been completely right. Kane liked to think that his father was proud of what he'd achieved. His monstrous nature receded sometimes, but eventually, always, he was a monster.
He did the monster mash. The monster mash.
Only with Daniel, he wasn't. With Daniel, there were fights, and rarely a quiet word between them. There'd been a lot of preaching about the overwhelming positives of veganism. There'd been anger management classes. There'd been the tag team titles. There'd been a shared Christmas. There'd been hugs.
Oh yeah!
It didn't matter what there'd been. It had fallen apart, of course, because everything that Kane touched fell apart eventually. The only relationship that had lasted was the bond he shared with his brother, and the Undertaker had gone to ground for a while. Kane knew, like his brother did, that there were times for fire and times for ashes. He also knew that no matter how many times he fought bloodily with the Undertaker, his brother would never voluntarily or permanently disappear from his life. It was the one thing that Kane could depend on. He'd learned that the hard way. So now Daniel was full of paranoid fury and a determination to get the WWE Championship. Kane was left facing the Wyatt family, who wanted to show what demons they were. Kane recognized the zeal in Bray Wyatt's eyes. He looked forward to extinguishing it. But even though Kane's monstrous side had seeped back into dominance again, something of the man he'd been at Daniel's side remained. He still found himself buying vegan snacks because Daniel forgot to eat when he was so intensely focused on something, and he still brought extra soy creamer for Daniel's coffee and noticed things that Daniel would like. It was infuriating. It was who he was, monster and man, and no matter what Kane did, he couldn't get it out of his system. When Daniel emerged through the curtain and began making his way toward his locker room, Kane appeared in front of him. Daniel didn't jump. He wasn't surprised at all. Kane hadn't intended on talking to him. He blamed his feet. They'd taken him right to Daniel. He'd run out of folding chairs to bend. Daniel was staring at him, a clear, challenging question on his face. Kane hadn't apologized yet for chokeslamming him the last time that they'd met. In the middle of the ring, a match made by Raw's general manager. Another attempt to crush Daniel before he got near the WWE Championship. Kane had been furious at Daniel's attitude, at how sure Daniel was that people were saying he was weak and worthless. Kane had never thought that. Now, they looked at each other in silence. Kane licked his lips. He couldn't tear his gaze away from Daniel. Triumphant, tie sky, beard intact. Daniel stared back. It was a good feeling. Eventually, Kane reached out, and his fingers brushed through Daniel's beard. He was sure that he saw Daniel swallow. "You're not corporate," Kane said at last. He ground his teeth because the words felt useless and wrong, but the fire was still burning in him, and something was changing in Daniel's eyes. He gave a slight nod. "Don't follow the buzzards." Kane smirked. He fully intended on catching and crushing any buzzards, birds, or rednecks that Bray Wyatt laid out before him, before he tore Wyatt himself apart. And Daniel was already moving away. Conversation over. The fire flickered again, greedily. When Daniel emptied out his bags that night, he'd find packets of vegan snack cakes, the kind containing actual vegan chocolate, the kind that Kane had always bought for him. Once upon a time, Kane had decided not to form any more friendships. He'd been betrayed, used, and abandoned too many times. It had cost him too much. A monster shouldn't have a heart. Daniel hadn't been a friend at first. Forced to team together, they'd barely been able to stand each other. But once a common enemy had appeared, their teamwork had clicked, and all the time they'd spent together had started to forge something, like a twisted version of friendship. Despite knowing the risks, despite knowing the pain that he would suffer because he always did, Cain hadn't been able to not respond to Daniel, because Daniel had never held out a hand in false friendship. Instead, he had berated and complained and had constantly claimed that he was better than Cain.
I'm the tag team champion!
And sometimes Cain had thought that. He'd glimpsed a familiar fire in Daniel, a fire that spoke to him, sometimes. They had been friends. Cain should have missed that, but he did. The Wyatt family was dangerous. Harper and Rowan were drones and disciples, muscle with powerful conviction. Bray Wyatt was something else. He was a believer.
All you have to do is believe!
As though he'd look into the flames like Cain had, and had come out a different strengthened person. Was that why he targeted Cain? He'd regret that. Cain had to be careful. He had to watch his back and ensure that the Wyatts and their buzzards were laid to rest. It was the sort of job the Undertaker would have taken on. But Cain's mind was not entirely focused on the Wyatt family. He couldn't stop watching whenever Daniel was on screen. He couldn't stop destroying his environment when Daniel was fighting against overwhelming odds. Daniel never gave up. That fire always burning in his eyes now, and made the flames inside Cain twist and bank and want. He bought a Respect the Beard shirt and kept it folded up in his bags. His fingers found it frequently, seeking memories in the wrinkles, seeking comfort that he should have sought elsewhere. He left bottled water in Daniel's bag, because sometimes Daniel forgot to rehydrate. Cain was too worried about him. He had monsters to hunt. One night when he reached to touch the soft folds of his Daniel shirt, his hand found cellophane instead. Someone had left a devil's food cake in his bag. The few who knew about Cain's sweet tooth were those who'd carved out a space for themselves beneath Cain's skin. Cain ate the cake ravenously. But when he was finished, he found that he still wanted more. Fire had always burned in Cain. It had been at the center of his life for as long as he could remember. Fire had taken his mother from him, leaving him with only vague, smoky memories. Was that smell of linseed oil really her? Sometimes he was sure that such memories were really dreams, because he'd known during childhood was the basement of a funeral home, and its furnace's fumes. Fire had been his brother's weapon. It had become his too, against his family and by their side. Fire was unpredictable and ultimately destructive, but Cain wasn't afraid of it. He had lived in its cauldron and survived. Fire was his constant. He could always rely on it. Daniel caused a very different fire to stir within Cain. It was anger, and it was hope, and Cain should have snuffed it out. Instead, he had grasped hold of it, drawn to its fury. It was a flame that had achieved gold, that had brought battles and friendship and worth. It was one that had brought an addictive burn. When he laid eyes on Daniel now, when he should have been sneering and calculating how to break Daniel apart, he was constantly aware of the fire he kept seeing in Daniel, refusing to quit. Cain had fought his brother in a squared circle of fire. They had sweltered and slugged, the air eaten up by flames, oxygen choking, smoke snarling. All Cain had cared about was beating the man who had warped his life. But Cain had been the one set alight in the end, his arm aflame. And then he'd run. From long burning memories of screams and smoke, he had lost, but he had survived. And Bray Wyatt thought that he was more demonic, that he was a greater, more devious threat. Cain chuckled at the thought. He had met monsters and demons. He saw one anew each day in the world's mirrors. Wyatt was a demonic creature. He was the eater of worlds that he claimed to be. Cain could see tentacles twisting around Wyatt's loathsome figure. He could see too many sharp teeth in the man's mouth, but he was not the worst of the world, or the world beyond. Cain knew that. Wyatt could be slain. So Cain crushes humanity, the man he could be, but shouldn't, and prepared for what he knew best. The fire helped. It called to him and kept him focused. The fire in his veins responded. In a ring of fire, Cain was home. Bray Wyatt had no clue what he would be facing. Cain smiled. He let his fire burn. Every part of Cain ached, but a laugh had been pouring from his mouth since the Wyatts had dragged him from the ring. Anyone could play dead. He was just gifted at it. He had learned from the best, and made the sorry state he left the Wyatts in backstage an even sweeter victory, especially after a defeat. Maybe he'd go back into the ring and enjoy the flames some more. It'd been too long since he'd enjoyed that embrace. He'd forgotten how perfect it was. Cain! Of course the Wyatts wouldn't stay dead. They'd seep out of the woodwork again. Cain had faced enough demons to know that. He'd be ready. He always had the fire within reach. He looked forward to it. Cain! The Undertaker would probably come calling soon. He disappeared after dealing with his shield, saying that he needed a ride in the desert, that mortal weights had gotten too much for him again. Like Cain, he lived between man and monster, and the crush of grief caused by Paul Bearer's death had been immense. The Undertaker needed to refocus. He needed to lay down his burdens when he returned. He would be wearing a cowl, and his eyes would be blank and featureless. Cain found something like that. Peace and flames and embers. Cain! A hand grasped his damp arm, a familiar hand. It caused Cain to stop dead in his tracks. Daniel Bryan stood beside him, eyes wild and wide, his very being bristling. Cain drank him in. It felt almost as good as the ring of fire had. Daniel's hand traveled up Cain's arm to press against his masked cheek. Daniel's fingers were scattered with crumbs. His mouth was breathless and concerned. He was shaking. Cain should have pulled away, only the fire inside was calling and saying something urgent, ignited by Daniel's close presence. You are both. You can have both. Cain's lip curled and he pressed closer to Daniel's touch. Sparks burned under Kane's skin. The fire in Daniel's eyes and touch were familiar. You! Daniel ran out of words. He pulled himself closer and violently mashed his lips against Kane's. It was a struggle between them. Who wanted it more? Who could get close enough? Daniel panted loudly, his hands roaming Kane like he was checking for injuries, or wanting to own everything in front of him. A greedy laugh rumbled in Kane's chest. Oh, this is what the fire wanted. Eventually they needed air and surface, lips staying close, neither wanting to let go. Daniel's expression was crazed and clenched. Kane liked it a lot, but... Your title, he reminded Daniel. Daniel frowned but started to loosen his grip. He did have a match and a championship to win. Kane grabbed a handful of Daniel's hair. I'll find you. Daniel lunged for another possessive kiss, his teeth biting hard at Kane's bottom lip. Then, with a frustrated gasp, he forced himself away and headed towards the curtain without looking back. He had to focus, and Kane would be watching, waiting, and burning hard. The championship belt should have been there, but it wasn't. Daniel braced himself against the hotel room wall, pushed back against Kane. Buried deep in Daniel, the fire in Kane felt high and snarling. It felt close to the surface, sizzling his flesh, part of him in a way that it hadn't been before. Was this the feeling that the Undertaker found in the desert? Was this what the urn had contained for so long? Kane had thought he'd known before, but now... Daniel clenched around him, snarling and sweating, a force greater than flesh. He liked the bruises that Kane left around his throat. He liked rough, hard thrust. He liked to bite. Kane looked forward to learning more. The flames were fierce and greedy in both of them. Kane growled and pushed harder. The two of them were in sync, brutal and burning. There were marks on Kane's thighs, chest, and wrist. Marks made by Daniel's aggressive mouth. You can have both. How could he only have a night of this? Fire had an unstoppable hunger. It never ceased until it consumed its victims. Daniel reached back and scraped hard fingernails down Kane's thighs. Kane thrust sharply, getting a punched-out groan and a wail of satisfaction. Daniel shoved back with vicious power, glancing over his shoulder, hunger in his eyes, blood smearing his lips. Consumed. It was a good fit for them, like it was who they always were supposed to be. Together, men and monsters. Daniel's movements became frantic, Kane's rushing to join him. The air smelled like sulfur and chocolate cake. The end. This story is called The Straight Edge Society, and it is written by WWE Killer. CM Punk is in his locker room, getting ready for his big match on SmackDown against Kane. He checks the tape wrapped around his wrist when there is a knock at his door. Punk motions for his bodyguard Luke Gallows to open the door, and the tall, bald wrestler opens the still locker room door, and into Punk's locker room walks Natalya Neidhart. She looks amazing with her blonde hair streaked with pink, tied up above her head. She also has on a pink leather jacket and pink and black one-shoulder top, showing off her flat midsection and low cut enough to show a great deal of her big breast. Punk's eyes go lower to Natalya's tight, pink wrestling tights and white boots, and the blonde looks stunning. And Punk has to take a second to put his eyes back on her face as she starts to Punk. Thank God you're here, Punk. I need your help, Natalya says to Punk, her head lowering slightly. Punk looks behind her to Luke Gallows, who is silent, asking Punk if he wants the diva thrown out, and Punk shakes his head to the big man, who shuts the locker room door and walks over to a corner of the room and takes a seat. On a still chair, his eyes focused on Punk and Natalya. I really need your help, Punk, Natalya says, staring deep into his eyes. I have this problem, and you are the only one who can help. What is your problem, Natty? You know, the straight edge lifestyle leaves one open to understand the troubles and pressures of others, Punk says, in his most reassuring tone of voice, placing his hand on Natalya's left shoulder. Well, Punk, the thing is, I have an addiction, and it rules my life, Natalya says sadly. Her hand rubs her eyes, trying to stop the crushing tears. Punk's hand grips her powerful shoulder tightly. Oh, Natalya, you did the right thing coming to see me. I can help you. I can lead you towards the life of the straight edge. Thanks, Punk. But my addiction isn't to drugs or drink, but it's sex. I can't stop having sex with the guys in the back. Anyone with a hard cock and I'm all over them. I don't think I can be saved. Natalya sobs, bearing her soul to the leader of the straight edge society. Natalya, you can be saved. I can free you from your hang-up and addictions, Punk says, looking over to Gallows and grinning at the massive bodyguard. How, Punk? I'm not strong enough to stop sucking and fucking dick altogether, Natalya says, looking up, and Punk, but in the corner of her eye, she can see a small bulge starting to form in Punk's small, black wrestling trunks. I'm not going to stop you enjoying cock altogether, Natalya, but I will lead you away from all the chain smoking, pill popping, beer swilling losers you have been sleeping with.
What?
And lead you into the straight edge, where bodies are pure and perfect. Punk smiles and puts his hand under Natalya's chin. Can you imagine? A body so pure, nothing toxic has ever entered into it? A pure body built for joy and pleasure. To live a clean life, Natalya. Those are the kind of people you should be sleeping, and using your amazing body to please them. Punk says, clearly eyeing up Natty's sexy body. So, if I live the straight edge lifestyle and sleep with straight edge guys, I'll be fine. I won't feel like a slut, Natalya asks, watching Punk staring at her big boobs. Yes, straight edge means you are better than everyone else, Natalya. You are not a slut. You don't abuse your body or kill it slowly with drink or drugs. You will be pure, Punk preaches. And The best way to lead you into this lifestyle is right now, is with me, your straight edge savior. I can fuck you and show you how good it feels to sleep with straight edge men. Punk grins at Natalya. So, if I give myself to straight edge, no more dirty sex with the ring crew, Natalya asks, and Punk shakes his head.
That is correct.
No more fucking my own tag team or anyone else in wrestling gear, she asks again, and once again Punk shakes his head. Natalya! It's amazing. Luke Gallows speaks up, surprising both Punk and Natalya. Straight edge saved my life before it was like living under a cloud, never knowing, only moving with the rest of the herd now. I'm standing in the light changed, and pure feeling alive and hopeful. That's it, Natalya, Punk says, pointing to his bodyguard. Look at Luke. He was a zombie. Then straight edge saved his life, and now he is free. Don't you want to be free? Natalya nods her head. Yeah, I want to be free. I want to be straight edge, and I want a straight edge cock. She moans, making Punk grin. Well, you're in luck, Natalya. I'm here to free you up from your addiction. I'm your savior, and I will lead you to salvation. Punk proclaims as he grabs the bottom of his t-shirt and pulls it off. Natalya licks her lips at seeing Punk's torso and tattoos as Punk kicks off his wrestling boots and lowers his ring trunks, letting his semi-hard 8-inch dick out into the open. Get on your knees, Natalya. Be reborn into the straight edge life. Suck on my cock and feel the joy. And the freedom of those born better than the rest of the world. Punk cries out, kicking away his trunks and watching the hot Canadian blonde sink to her knees in front of him. Reaching out, Natalya grabs Punk's semi-hard prick and begins to stroke it slowly, sliding her hand up and down his thick shaft. Punk groans as Natalya's soft hand rubs his dick, and it starts to grow fully hard in her grip as Punk grabs his hands behind his head and enjoys what the sexy diva is doing to him. Natalya pumps her hand a little faster, getting CM Punk fully erect, his purple cockhead swelling up, pointing right in her face. Leaning forward, Natalya runs her tongue across his dickhead, making Punk's knees shake and brings out a louder groan of pleasure. Oh yeah, Natalya, that's it. Suck it. Suck my big, hard, straight-edge cock. Feel how good it tastes. Punk commands, and Natalya follows his orders, opening her mouth wide and feeding his big cock into her mouth. Inch by inch, Punk's dick disappears into Natalya's warm mouth, and Punk moans as Natalya easily gets all 8 inches of dick into her mouth, then slowly starts to suck on it. Punk thrusts his hips forward slightly, going along with her strong sucks, getting his dick wet with her saliva as she gives the leader of the Straight Edge Society a blowjob. Natalya sinks her fingernails into Punk's strong thighs, holding him steady as she picks up the pace, sucking Punk's cock harder. The noise of his dick sliding into her wet mouth, filling up the locker room, Natalya slobbers over Punk's dick and licks her pink tongue over every inch of his shaft. And this is already turning out to be one of the dirtiest blowjobs I've seen in Punk's life. He slides a hand through her long, blonde locks, just as the strong diva takes a deep breath and deep throats Punk's prick, making his eyes go wide, and he cries out with joy. Oh yeah, Natty! Suck that cock, take it all the way down your throat, and suck on it, you dirty little slut. Punk cries, and Natalya groans from Punk's dirty talk and starts bobbing her head faster on Punk's cock as her hands move around and massage his balls. Dirty girl! You must have sucked loads and loads of cocks to get this good, Punk moans. You don't even gag with my prick this far down your throat. Natalya nods and sucks Punk's cock at the same time as she really wants to make him come, so she lightly grinds her teeth over the top of his cock, sliding the sharp edges across his shaft. Oh god, yes! Oh! Punk shuts his eyes and groans as Natalya sucks hard on his cock. You know, all those other cocks you have sucked have never tasted this good, have they, Natty? Groaning into his cock, Natalya nods her head as Punk continues. And that is because my cock has never been intoxicated and shoved inside a fellow drinker. It's never needed a little blue pill to get, and it has never been victim to secondhand smoke after having sex. That, Natalya, Punk says, puffing his chest out, is because I am straight edge, completely pure, and free of all of life's poisons and evils. Doesn't it feel so much better than all the other lowlifes and losers who have fucked you? Natalya grows with approval of Punk's words and starts really sucking harder, making Punk's entire body rock at the force of Natalya's bobbing head. Natty pounds her face forward, driving Punk's dick further and harder down her throat. She sucks on it hard, and her tongue slides across his rock-hard shaft. And Punk places his hand on the young blonde's head, guiding her to keep sucking his big dick. Suck my big cock, Natalya, and be ready, because straight edge will change your life. It'll make you better than the rest of the WWE universe. Punk moans, preaching to Natalya as she gives him an amazing blowjob. Natalya rubs her hands up and down Punk's big, strong thighs, filling his smooth skin with the palms of her hands. She bobs her head back and forth, sliding her lips across his big shaft, making Punk moan and groan as Natty sucks his cock better than anyone ever has before. Natalya, I think I can help your addiction. I can save you from your fellow weak-minded sheep that plague this land. Punk moans as he lifts his right hand into the air and looks down at Natalya. Don't stop sucking, Natty, but I want you to raise your right hand. I want you to take the pledge and give your life and addiction to me, your straight edge savior.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have some decorum, please?
Punk yells at Natalya, sucks harder, but lifts her right hand in the air as she is on her knees blowing Punk's big dick. Your addiction is now part of me. I will only let you use your addiction on those in the straight edge society. Only those who have earned it should get a chance to fill your amazing mouth. Punk growls as Natalya deep throats his big dick, and CM Punk's cockhead starts pushing against the walls on Natalya's throat. Natalya still has her hand in the air as she sucks the life out of Punk's dick. Her other hand moves in between Punk's legs, and she starts rubbing her fingers over his balls. Punk groans and runs his other hand through his long black hair as Natalya sucks his cock like a true slut. Natalya, Punk moans, you are a true straight edge slut, and now all you have to do is taste my cum. Drink it all up, and you're a part of the straight edge society. You will be saved, Punk screams as he thrusts his hips forward and comes straight down Natalya's throat. Natalya braces herself as Punk's warm seed shoots down her throat, and the blonde wants to taste and drink every drop, not for Punk, and to join the SES, but because she loves tasting cum. It's her favorite thing about a blowjob, is getting to swallow all the guy's cum, nearly draining him of his juices. She swallows every blob of cum CM Punk fires into her wide open mouth, and as she swallows, Natty keeps her right arm in the air. Yeah, Natty, taste it. This is the only substance you should be addicted to. Punk cries as his knees go weak as he keeps sending wave after wave of cum into the young Canadian's mouth. Punk's dick goes limp as Natalya swallows the last few drops, then opens her mouth, and Punk steps back, still a little dazed and drained, but with a big smile on his face. Good girl, Natalya. Welcome to the straight edge society. Punk grins, taking a seat next to his own locker, tired but very satisfied. Do I have to shave my head and walk around with you guys? Natalya asks, getting to her feet and stretching out her sore knee joints. No. Not all the members need my constant watch and guidance. You can keep your hair, but when I say jump, you must jump, whatever you are doing, and come and serve me. Punk grins, and then looks behind Natalya to see Luke Gallows, who has a bulge beginning to poke out in his camouflage pants. But while I'm recovering, and you are now part of the straight edge society, my friend Luke over there would like a chance to be the first straight edge cock inside of you. Punk points out. Natalya spins around to see Luke Gallows grinning as he takes off his jet black hat and pulls off his SES t-shirt. He kicks off his black combat boots and unclips his belt, and now his pants come down and his hard 10 inches of penis become exposed. And Natalya's mouth starts to water. Luke stands in front of her completely naked as Punk sits back against the wall, his hands behind his head as he watches Gallows and Natalya. The blonde grins at him, and soon her pink top and white boots join the big pile of clothes on the floor. Luke reaches forward and wraps his hands across Natalya's massive chest, filling up her big tits, making her moan softly. Gallows' fingers race around her pink nipples that are erect and almost an inch wide, and Luke takes great pleasure in squeezing and rubbing her big boobs. Natalya takes a step back away from Gallows' soft hands and unclips the belt on her pants and lets the heavy leather belt fall to the locker room floor. She then slides her pink spandex pants down her wide hips and down her powerful-looking legs to her ankles. Kicking her pants away, Natalya stands totally naked in front of the SES, and both eyes are staring at her amazing body. Natalya is smaller than most divas, but her body is a perfect fit for her size, as her massive boobs stick out and her shaved blonde pussy is already dripping wet down her legs. You like? Natalya asks, teasing the two naked wrestlers. Gallows grins and starts stroking his hard cock, and Natalya smiles. She walks back to where there is a table pushed up against the wall. She jumps onto it and spreads her legs, showing even more of her pink, dripping wet pussy to Punk and Gallows. No, Natalya. The straight edge lifestyle doesn't have a cock first time in the pussy. They bend over and they take it up the ass, Punk says, a sick smile on his face. Natalya grins and spins around, bending over, sticking her big ass out right in front of Luke Gallows, who strokes his cock harder as he stares at Natalya's big tanned ass. Natalya braces herself as the massive frame of Luke Gallows stands behind her near-naked body, his big dick swinging in between his legs. Pushing forward, Gallows pushes his cockhead against the entrance of Natty's asshole, making her moan. Have you ever taken a big hard cock up your ass, Natalya? Punk questions, the bent of her blonde while stroking his long beard. Yes, Punk, I have. Natty moans, wiggling her ass from side to side, trying to push more of Gallows' prick inside her large ass. I love it when guys fuck my big ass, but I've never had a cock this big in my booty. Smiling, Punk wordlessly nods to Luke to carry on, and the chaplain of the Straight Edge Society pushes forward with a grunt, driving 10 inches of cock into Natalya's asshole. Her ass isn't too tight, but Luke's big cock still causes the second-generation wrestler a lot of pain as his massive prick pushes into her asshole. Gallows can't fit his giant cock into Natalya, so once he is a good few inches in, he starts to move and push his hips into her, managing to get a few extra inches into her ass by fucking her. Natalya's bright white fingernails dig roughly into the smooth wood of the table as her ass is being fucked by this massive 6 foot 300 pound grappler. Harder and faster, Gallows picks up the pace as Punk watches on, enjoying the show as two members of the straight edge society fuck in front of him. Natty's big tits wobble and shake as her ass is taken hard by the large Gallows, and he grabs Natty by her tan hips and really starts to pound her booty with his large prick. Oh fuck, Luke! Fuck me with your big fat cock! Fuck me in the ass! Natalya moans with pleasure as the pain subsides and she can start enjoying Gallows' dick fucking her ass.
Oh God.
A man of few words, and now, as it also seems, few moans and groans, Luke Gallows pounds her ass as hard as he can, with big beads of sweat trickling down his large muscular arms. His cock slips in and out of Natty's stretched out asshole, making the young blonde moan and groan as Gallows tightens his grip on her hip and pounds her so hard the table starts to rock and move. The scratching sound of table legs sliding across the concrete floor would fill the room if it wasn't already drowned out by Natalya's deep and lustful cries of joy. Punk now stands up, watching the ass fucking, intensely his own dick becoming semi-hard as he rubs a taped-up hand over his cock, making it twitch as Natalya moans for more. Please, Luke, fuck me harder. I'm a dirty, straight-edge slut. I take it even harder if you do it. I promise. I vow to be the best straight-edge slut out there. The blonde practically begs the wrestler fucking her ass. Luke can't refuse such an offer, but still looks over at Punk, asking his savior for permission, which he does with a grin on his face, running his hands through his long black hair as he watches, and believes what a slut Natalya is. Gallows thrusts in harder for the first time, getting all 10 inches into Natalya, filling the blonde whore up, and Natalya responds to the lifting her whole body up off the table and moans loudly like an auditioning porn star. Punk's eyes are drawn to Natty's massive tits, which hang down, and her big pink nipples are fully erect, and look so tasty that Punk licks his pierced lips and moves over to the anal slut. Natalya looks up to see Punk standing next to her, and before she can speak, his hands reach out and grab her massive tits and squeeze them at the same time. Gallows slams all 10 inches straight down Natty's asshole. Oh my fucking God! Fuck me, please! I need to be fucked like the whore I am! Fuck me! Oh! Natalya moans, as loud as her voice can manage, and Punk grins, thinking about all the workers and superstars backstage that might be able to hear this slut moan. Punk acts on her moans and squeezes her tits harder, letting her soft skin run through his fingers, as he plays and teases her rock-hard nipples. Gallows keeps bucking his hips into the blonde, sweat moving down his bald head, as he can feel his balls ache, knowing he won't last much longer, fucking this dirty slut. His large hands now latch on Natalya's big ass cheeks, and give the soft hand flesh a long hard squeeze, in much the same way Punk is squeezing Natty's breasts. Rubbing Natty's big nipples, Punk cannot help but lean down and lick one of her nipples, making Natalya's whole body shake with pleasure. As Gallows bucks his hips in roughly, his own dual moans and groans become deeper. Natalya can feel Gallows is coming near the end, and she starts pushing her ass back into him and shaking it a little, trying to give more pleasure to his massive dick. And soon Gallows is grunting hard, his fingers digging and holding onto Natalya's skin. Punk! I'm going to come, the soft-spoken monster says to his leader, who gets up, spitting out Natalya's tits and grinning. Pull out, Luke, and Natty, get on your knees. I want you to prove how much you are willing to be straight-edged. He orders, and quickly his two followers move into the positions Punk points out to them. A naked Natalya Neidhart on her knees, rubbing her thighs together to pleasure her dripping wet and underused pussy, while her left hand rubs her spit-covered boob, filling CM Punk's warm saliva. Gallows is standing over, also completely naked, holding onto his massive tool, and strokes it, aiming the large head right at Natalya's face, and the blonde knows what Punk wants, and shuts her eyes. It doesn't take Luke long to get himself worked up, and with one low, long, animal-like groan, he shoots and a thick wad of cum flies and splats right onto Natalya's face. Not done with one shot, Luke jerks his big shaft hard, sending several more streams of sticky cum hitting Natalya's cute face, almost covering the blonde's face from view, like a bizarre mask. Gallows, tired out, falls back as sits against a locker as Natalya opens her eyes and runs a hand across her cum-coated face. A big smile appears on her face as she wipes a bit of cum off her eyes so she can open them before licking Luke's cream off her fingers and moans lustfully at tasting his seed, and the second load of cum in the last few hours. Punk stares down at her, now jerking his own hard prick, his eyes picking between her cum-covered face, massive boobs, and her pussy, which is licking a small puddle of juices onto his locker room floor. Natty wipes a bit more off her face before looking up to see Punk, standing over her in much the same way Gallows did. She can see his rock-hard prick, erect in front of her, still wet, with his earlier cum, but rock-hard, and ready for action again. And she can help, but give the straight-edge savior a little cheeky grin. "I'm still a slut, Punk," Natalya says, wiping the last traces of cum from her face, staring at him. "No amount of straight edge can stop me being addicted to cocks." "Of course not, Natty. Your addiction to sex is just now to having sex with members of the straight edge society. And that is not addiction, it's an obligation." Punk says, with a grin plastered on his face, as he helps Natty back to her feet and leads her back over to the sweat-covered table where Gallows had fucked her a few minutes ago. He helps Natalya sit on the edge of the table, and without even telling her, Natty spreads her legs, exposing her wet pussy lips to her new leader. Wasting no more time, Punk presses her dick against her pussy and pushes into her, making both wrestlers moan with pleasure as Punk fills up her soaking wet cunt. He starts thrusting into her, and Natty is rocking back and forth, her hands holding onto the table for dear life, as Punk fucks her like a wild man. Her juices have lubed up her pussy to the point in which Punk has no trouble forcing his big dick in and out of her pussy, which allows him to go at an ultra-fast pace, really pounding his cock inside the blonde, making her scream and cry. Looking up, Punk's eyes are again drawn to Natty's huge tits, bouncing and shaking up and down from the force of his fucking, as his hips pound into Natty's as his cock pounds her wet pussy. The table will slide all the way back into the wall from the force of the straight edge society, trying to fuck the addiction out of Natalya. Groaning and moaning, Natalya lets go of the table and runs her hands through her curly blonde hair, moaning in intense pleasure. She has been needing a release ever since that horny ring hand finished off without letting her come. Leading her to Punk's so long awaited orgasm is all Natalya can think about, and Punk is bringing her closer and closer to her. Punk can't resist her big bouncing boobs anymore, so he cranes his head forward and starts licking and sucking on her big tits as his hands move around, grabbing her hips, holding the blonde steady so he can really enjoy her boobs. "Oh yeah, Punk! That's it! Shit! Lick them! Lick my dirty tits! Make me come, Punk! I need to come! I want it so bad! I'm so horny! Make me come!" Natalya gasps as Punk bites on her left nipple, at the same time slamming his prick right into her G-spot. The blonde's eyes roll back into her head, and she leans back, nearly screaming the locker room down, as Punk pounds her pussy hard, looking to make his new disciple come. Punk's taped up his hands move to Natty's massive breast, and he starts squeezing and pulling at the flesh as he keeps the pressure up, fucking Natalya's pussy as hard as he can, his big cock pounding and rubbing against her wet and sensitive pussy walls, making her moan and cry out in built-up lust and joy. "I'm coming, Punk! Jesus Christ! I'm coming!" Natty screams as Punk pounds her hip into a mind-blowing orgasm. Her whole body shakes, and her moans and groans are so loud, for a second Gallows has to cover his ears, as the blonde screams till she loses her voice. Punk keeps his dick inside on her and holds onto her breast throughout her earth-shattering orgasm. But as soon as it finishes, he holds onto Natalya's limp body and slowly pulls his dick out of her pussy. His cock is covered in her cum, and it's dripping onto the floor. As Punk turns Natty around and bends her over the desk again, sticking her big ass out. Natalya is barely conscious as she is bent over, and Punk grabs his cock and wipes Natty's cum off on her own big booty. After getting his cock clean of her cum, Punk pulls Natty's head up by her hair as he pushes his pulsing dick into her early, well-fucked asshole. Natalya moans dully as she can't even feel Punk enter her ass, as her head is still spinning from that massive orgasm. Punk pushes deep into Natalya's ass and really starts to fuck that ass. As he pulls back on her hair, keeping her pretty face off the sweat-stained table, the straight-edge savior is pounding away at Natalya's large round ass, his hips crashing into her smooth flesh as he drives his cock deeper inside the blonde. Natalya has still not recovered from her orgasm, but her senses clear enough to know that she is being fucked hard in the ass, and her automatic response to this is to groan. Yeah! Punk hears the groan, and it really turns him on, as he knows, after all, he and Gallows have fucked out of her. She is still ready and willing for more. Her deep, throaty moans make Punk rock forward, move, driving his hard dick deeper into her ass, really fucking her already well-fucked hole. Punk's taped-up fingers find Natalya's large ass cheeks, and his fingers sink into her flesh, and he starts to moan and groan. "Fuck yeah, Natalya, take it. Take my big cock, you straight-edge slut." Punk howls as his voice getting deeper, as he almost humps Natalya's thick booty, looking to try and come. Natalya responds by increasing her groans and arching her back, allowing Punk to dive deeper into her rectum, and his big dick really fills up her tight ass. Shaking his head from side to side, Punk tries to flick his sweaty hair out of his face, his eyes focused only on Natalya's tan rear, as he pulls his dick all the way out of her asshole, before driving it back in again, getting the full length of his cock inside of her. Natalya's head starting to clear, and the room swings back into focus, as she can really feel Punk's small build body pushing into her from behind. His grunt and loud groans meaning he is getting close to finishing. The blonde wants her new master to finish, so she starts pushing her own small, well-built body back, slamming and driving her own ass onto his prick, making her eyes widen as she yells in pleasure, "Shit, yes! Punk! Fuck my ass! Fuck my big, sweaty ass, punk! Pound my hole! Fuck me, punk! Fuck my ass!" Natalya howls, her voice carrying all around the almost empty locker room. Hearing those lust-filled moans, Punk doubles up his own efforts, driving his cock with reckless abandonment into Natalya's sore asshole as in a corner. Luke Gallows was getting dressed, but he stops and watches the fucking going on a few feet in front of him. Punk pounds Natalya's asshole hard, his balls bouncing off her thick thighs, and he shuts his eyes hard, trying to hold back the building feeling of lust. Natalya's moans and groans are getting louder as she grabs hold of her own massive tits and squeezes them, making sure she nearly deafens Punk with her moans and cries. Holding on tight, Punk's nails bite into Natalya's ass cheeks as he pounds her hard, his cock dripping pre-cum into her hole, and he knows it's only a matter of seconds before he explodes. "Shit, Natty! I'm coming! Fuck!" Punk yells as Natalya braces herself against the table, ready for him to come. Punk pushes his dick deep inside her ass, and he moans hard as cum shoots out of his dick, filling up her ass, and after a few squirts of cum deep into her ass, Punk pulls out. He grabs his cock and aims it at Natalya's tan brown ass, and sends several waves of spunk across her smooth skin, coating her ass. Gallows laughs as Punk decorates her ass with cum, and Natalya moans and wiggles her ass as she feels his hot jizz on her skin. Punk finishes with one last jet, then staggers back to the locker room he was sitting on, catching his breath and taking a big gulp of water. Natalya breathes hard too, and slowly picks herself up off the table, her whole body caked with sweat, and her ass covered in Punk's cum. She moves towards him, limping, as both her pussy and ass are very sore, having taken two big wrestlers fucking her hard. She stands in front of Punk and kneels before him, her head bowed slightly, and Punk rests his hand on her sweaty head. "You are saved," he grumbles, tired, but happy, as he has another soldier in his straight-edge fight. The end. Thank you for listening to episode 11 of Wrestle Erotica. We hope that you enjoyed this week's stories. As always, please make sure to check us out on Player.fm, Stitcher, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our official website, WrestleEroticaPod.com. Thank you and have a good week.